everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chargers Analytics with Arjun. I hope everyone is doing well and is excited for this upcoming draft, which is this Thursday. There are a ton of possibilities the Chargers could go through at pick 13. Do they stay there? Do they trade up? Do they trade down? It should be a really fun week with a lot of options for the Chargers. Now, in our last episode, we talked a little bit about the analytics behind passing on early downs and looked at the Chargers specifically. But today, we're going to actually transition into a part of the offense where I feel like the Chargers really struggled, which was their run game. So we're going to be looking at the run game from an analytical perspective. I'm going to show you guys some visuals and some clips of why I think the Chargers really struggled, and then compare it to the rest of the NFL and the Saints, because now we have Joe Lombardi as our offensive coordinator. So as usual, let's dive straight into it. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and show you guys this graph right here. So this graph looks at the passing and rushing efficiency in 2020 in terms of EPA per play. And just as a reminder, EPA per play stands for expected points added per play. And why EPA is such a good metric is it takes into account the fact that not all yards are created equal. So rushing for 5 yards on 1st and 10 gives a team a higher EPA than rushing for 5 yards on 3rd and 8. Now, obviously, I hope that no team rushes for 5 yards on 3rd and 8, because running the ball on 3rd down is just not smart play calling, especially if you're losing the game. But that is just a little bit about why EPA is such a great metric, and it takes into account a bunch of other factors: down and distance, win probability, time left in the quarter, and things like that. So as you can see, the Chargers rank right next to the Falcons in terms of dropback EPA and rushing EPA. So you can see they are above average when it comes to dropback EPA, but they are way below average when it comes to rushing EPA. And if we look at the table, the Chargers rank 28 when it comes to rushing EPA, throughout the whole season. And that's just not a good look. And again, I talked about this in my last episode, but running the ball is not necessarily an indication of how good or bad the running back room is for the Chargers. So this is not looking at how good or bad Kalen Ballage, Eckler, Justin Jackson, or Joshua Kelly is. More of an indication of how bad the offensive line really was last year and how bad the play calling was to a certain extent. So the Chargers generated negative 0.141 yards or EPA per rush, which is not good. Obviously, it ranked 28th. Right now, we can also look at how bad the Chargers running game was from a different perspective, which is rushing success rate. So when we filter in rushing success rate, the Chargers ranked 29th in the league. Now, how do we measure success rate? Well, success rate is measured on a couple of different factors. So on 1st and 10, if a running back or any other player gains 40% of the yards needed to get a first down, that is considered a success. So on 1st and 10, if they rush for 4 yards or more, it is a success. On 2nd down, they either have to gain 6 yards or gain half the distance to the first down marker. So for example, if it's 2nd and 10, they either have to gain 5 yards or more, or if it's something like 2nd and 20 and they gain 6 yards, that is considered a success. So that's just a little bit about how the Chargers struggled last year from an analytical perspective. Looking at EPA per play, again, ranked pretty low when it came to rushing EPA. But when we look at, their dropback EPA, they did rank 10th. So they were a top 10 passing offense last year, despite having, one of the worst pass blocking units along the offensive line. So now we're going to transition into some of these data visuals I put together for you guys. So in these visuals, we're going to be looking at the yards per carry for each run gap in the NFL, and then we're going to look at the Chargers as well. So I'm going to explain these visuals to you guys right here. Before we go into the numbers, I'm going to explain a little bit about each of the gaps. So the orange bars, as you can see, represent the end gaps. So outside the tackles are called the end gaps. The yellow bars between the tackle and the guard are called the tackle gaps. Between the guard and the center are called the guard gaps, and straight over the center is called the middle gap. So straight off the bat, we can see that running the ball outside the tackles in the end gaps is much more efficient than running the ball inside the tackles. As we move further inside, the yards per carry for each of these run gaps decreases. And once we hit that guard and center gap, it's almost a full yard less than the tackle gaps. So running the ball outside the tackles is much more efficient than running the ball inside the tackles. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this, right? On short yardage situations, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, generally a team is going to run the ball up the middle. You're going to get in heavy formation. You're going to get a fullback in maybe, and you're going to hand the ball into your bruising running back, right? And so a lot of these 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 situations, you're going to hand the ball to running back to run up the middle, and you're just trying to gain a yard. You're just trying to get a first down. So yes, the yards per carry for some of these gaps inside are much lower than outside. But again, we're going to be looking at EPA for these run gaps later in the episode. So stay tuned to see, the comparisons. But, this is the yards per carry for the NFL overall. Now, if we transition to the Chargers, man, it looks bad. Right off the bat, the Chargers are below average at every single run gap. Every single one. There's not one run gap where they are above average. And I included some of the names of the players who played at each position for the Chargers. So at left tackle, Sam Tevi, Storm Norton. Forrest Lamb started every game at left guard. Good for him. Feeney, same thing at center. Good for him. We had the revolving door of right guards last season. Trey Turner, Cole Toner, Ryan Groy, even Tyree St. Louis started the first game against the Bengals. And at right tackle, Brian Bulaga, Trey Pipkins, and Storm Norton all started games there. Now, as we can see, the Chargers, they were efficient running the ball outside the tackles. They were more efficient, I should say, running the ball outside the tackles than running the ball inside. I mean, if you look at the left tackle gap between tackle and guard where Forrest Lamb played, I mean, they're a full 1.18 yards per carry lower than the NFL average. I mean, that is horrible. That sucks. And that is the lowest yards per carry gap that they have. But what is telling to me is the amount of times they rushed the ball up the middle, right? In the middle gap, they had 135 attempts. The middle gap, if you see in the NFL graph, is the second least efficient run gap in the NFL. Yet they proceeded to run the ball up the middle at like 135 times last year, which is outstanding to me. And it makes me really question what Anthony Lynn's philosophy is. He comes from the Shanahan system. He played under Mike Shanahan. He has said he wants to establish the outside run, but he proceeded to run the ball up the middle 135 times. I don't know. It didn't make sense last year, right? But we don't have these guys anymore. We don't have Trey Turner, Cole Toner, Dan Feeney, Forrest Lamb, Sam Tevi. All of these starters are gone, right? So I'm going to show you the next graph on the left. And this is looking at the yards per carry for each of the Chargers' new additions alongside the interior offensive line last year on their respective teams, okay? So if we look at Matt Filer, the left tackle gap and the left guard gap are his yards per carry when he's with the Steelers. So off the bat, we can see they are higher than what Lamp and Feeney were providing along that left side in the interior, but they are below average when it comes to comparing Filer's numbers to the rest of the NFL. But there are other factors when it comes to evaluating the Steelers. They didn't have a really good running backs group. And so obviously their yards per carry is a little bit lower, but Filer is an upgrade over what Lamp and Feeney are providing. I'm going to just move over to Ode Ibushi real quick. His numbers are a little bit lower than what Trey Turner, and Ryan Groy were providing. And it is a little bit concerning to me because they are, really low and they are way below average comparing to the NFL. But I would like to point out that the Lions were continuously playing from behind almost every single game. Ode Ibushi only had 15 attempts through that right guard gap, right? So that should be a telling factor that, if we give him more opportunities to block for, solid runners that the Chargers have, that yards per carry could go up. And, hopefully with more attempts, he becomes more physical in the run game. Now we're going to move to the crown jewel of the Chargers offseason, which was Corey Linsley. And I mean, I was pounding the table for him all offseason. And this is why. I mean, 5.53 yards per carry in the second least efficient run gap in the NFL. Just compare him to Feeney. So just look at that. 1.85 more yards per carry over Feeney. I mean, Linsley is a clear upgrade alongside this offensive line. And it shows, right? A higher yards per carry than Feeney, a way higher yards per carry than the NFL average. I mean, this is just outstanding from Linsley, and why I'm so excited to see him, Filer, and Ibushi in action. So as you can see, Filer and Linsley upgrades over whatever Lamp and Feeney were providing. Ibushi a little bit lower, but I still believe he's a solid player, And, there's other factors like how bad Detroit's running back room was. They were giving Adrian Peterson carries over Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift for half the season. And the fact that Lions were playing from behind for most of the year. Now, yards per carry may not be the best way to evaluate, a team's rushing attack. Well, then we have EPA, right? We talked about EPA at the beginning of the episode. We're bringing it back here. So EPA confirms some of the priors that as we move further inside, we're going to see a lower EPA per play than rushing outside the tackles. Now, there's a reason I would say that the center gap is a little bit higher for EPA per rush. A lot of the times you're going to see touchdowns scored on 1-2 yard runs up the middle, right? So that's why the center has a slightly higher EPA per play than most of the other guard or tackle gaps. But still, running outside the tackles is much more efficient than running inside the tackles. And if we compare the Chargers to what the NFL was, again, below average in every single category, just horrible running the ball. Lamp had a negative 0.361 EPA per rush when they were rushing through the left tackle gap. Him and Tevy or him and Norton just couldn't move anyone, and it showed in the film. And we're going to get to that a little bit later in the episode. But the last graph I want you guys to look at is the Saints. And off the bat, when I was creating the graph for the Saints, I was like, wow, they have 5 gaps where they have a positive EPA per rush. And mind you, running the ball is not efficient. A lot of teams have a negative EPA per rush, but the Saints have a positive EPA per rush in almost every single gap. 5 out of the 7 gaps, they have a positive EPA per rush, which is crazy. And it just speaks to show how much they've really invested alongside that offensive line. They had Teron Armstead at left tackle, Andrews Pete at left guard, Eric McCoy at center. They had a revolving door of right guards, Cesar Ruiz, Will Clapp. And then at right tackle, they had, all pro Ryan Ramczyk. All 5 of those offensive linemen are first rounders or third rounders. So they invested alongside that offensive line in the first 3 rounds. So for the guys that want to say, let's take Waddle at 13, who's going to be the Teron Armstead of this offense for Joe Lombardi? I don't know, right? If we get, like Christian Darrisaw or even a Tevin Jenkins at 13, maybe we can try to recreate these numbers. The Saints are like above average in almost every single gap. They're positive in almost every single gap, which is great for them. But hopefully this translates to better numbers for the Chargers next season in terms of EPA per rush. So that we just took a look at some of the data visuals I put together in terms of EPA per rush and yards per carry. But like I said before in my first episode, analytics doesn't always show everything you need to know about a team. And to properly evaluate a team, you also need to have some film to go alongside with it. So we're going to be looking at some film from this past season. So the first clip I'm going to show you, this is the Chargers versus the Bucks. This is a 1st and 10 for the Chargers in the Bucks territory. So as you can see, the Chargers are in a 2 tight end set, Virgil Green, Hunter Henry. And I'm just going to name you their offensive line. Sam Tevy, Forrest Lamp, Dan Feeney, Ryan Groy, Trey Pipkins. That is an offensive line right there, right? This was one of the worst offensive line combos we would probably see anywhere in the NFL. Let's see what the Chargers do on this play. So 1st and 10, hand the ball straight up the middle, 1 yard loss to Lavonte David, who's probably one of the best inside linebackers in the league. Now let's look a little bit closer into this, right? So Herbert is handing the ball off to Josh Kelly. So the gap he's supposed to hit is between Pipkins and Ryan Groy right here. He's supposed to hit this gap, right? Instead, he cuts back to where Lavonte David is, like, he's right there, and he gets tackled for a 1 yard loss. Now, just watch Justin Herbert on this play also. Look, he's pointing. He knows the gap. He was supposed to go right. Joshua Kelly did not hit that gap, and it just shows running the ball up the middle is just not efficient. You're going to have, just think about it this way. Defenses are going to put their best run defenders on the inside. Vita Vea, in my opinion, a top 3 defensive tackle, the best run stuffer in the league, is up the middle, and they proceed to run straight at him, right? Now, let's go through what would have happened if he hit the right gap. If he hit the gap between Pipkins and Groy blocks David. Watch, Virgil is trying to get to Devin White, right? So he gets to Devin White. Then it's basically what we're going to see is Virgil blocks him, Groy blocks him. It's a one-on-one with the safety, Antoine Winfield. But they're going to gain more yardage than -1 yards if Kelly hits the right gap. right? So that was the Chargers against the Bucs, one of the best run defenses in the league. We're going to look at the Saints now, right? Joe Lombardi is our offensive coordinator. So in this play, I believe it's 1st and 20. This is the Saints versus the Chiefs, right? They're in a one tight end set, Jared Cook on the left side. So let's see what the Saints do here. Hike the ball. Looks like they're running outside zone on the right side. Now, they gained 6 yards from this play, which is, pretty solid. Let's go a little bit back and see what, how well this developed, right? So they're running the ball outside. As you can see, there's a huge hole there, right? McCoy hits him, Ruiz hits him, Ramczyk's doing a great job pushing him out. Andrews Pete, if you watch him closely, he doesn't secure this block, which allows the linebacker to get off the block and make this tackle for 6 yards. Now, if Kamara was able to get past this guy, right? If Pete holds his block, right, then Kamara has a one-on-one with Dan Sorensen. And I'm like 100% confident Kamara wins that and takes that to the house. But he missed his block, which only means Kamara got 6 yards. But still, 6 yards a carry, that's pretty good. And they ran it outside. Keep that in mind. Now let's transition into the Chargers versus the Jags, week 7. Now, in week 7, they beat the Jags, but they just couldn't run the ball still. And the Jags had one of the worst run defenses in the league. And mind you, they were playing without Myles Jack this game. Right. So this is 3rd and 1. Joshua Kelly's the running back. Let's see what they do. So they hike the ball, run it straight up the middle for no yards. 3rd and 1, mind you. They need 1 yard to get a first down. Run it straight up the middle, no yards gained. Now let's look at what went wrong here. So they hike it. Feeney takes him. They have to double team one defensive tackle. If Groy hits him, Kelly's gone. There's no one up here. They're blitzing. They have 6 in the box right now, right? Groy needs to get off that block and hit him. It's a one-on-one with the linebacker, and Kelly just, he couldn't get past that. So, running the ball up the middle is 0 yard gain, -1 yard gain for the Chargers against the Bucs and then the Jags. Now, in our final clip, we're going to be looking at the Saints versus the Packers. I believe this is week 3, right? So the Saints are in a 2 tight end set. Josh Hill, Adam Troutman here. Let's see what the Saints do on this play. 1st and 10, by the way. So they hike the ball and they run an outside counter, something I've always wanted the Chargers to do. Austin Eckler can be the Alvin Kamara of this offense. Maybe not as good, but he could be in a very similar role, right? And Saints ran outside the tackles on this play, right? So look, double team Zadarius Smith, double team the D tackle. Ramczyk takes care of him, double team him. And so he got stuck inside. He thought they were running inside, but they ran a counter. Look at all this open room, right? Josh Hill takes care of the safety. I believe that's Traquan Smith. Yep, takes care of the corner. Now it's just a one-on-one with Adrian Amos. Amos stumbles, and now Kamara has a 50-yard gain outside the tackles. Something I'm hoping Joe Lombardi does next year. He implements what the Saints are doing, running outside the tackles. And this is why I really want an offensive tackle at 13. I mean, we get a stellar offensive line. It doesn't only help Justin Herbert. It takes pressure off of him and gives the running backs more of opportunities to succeed, right? The Chargers have never had a good offensive line for Austin Eckler or for Justin Jackson. A lot of the things they have done well, they've manufactured for themselves. So Kamara takes his 50 yards. So those were just a couple of clips regarding what the Chargers were doing and what the Saints are doing. Hopefully Lombardi implements some of the same stuff that he was with the Saints. Now, that's going to take us to the end of the episode, you guys. I hope this was pretty informative and gave you a little bit of an insight into the Chargers' run gaps last year compared to the rest of the NFL and compared to the Saints. Don't forget to make sure to comment any potential topics you want me to talk about in future episodes. I'd love to get into some of these fan topics later down the road. And with that, as always, bolt up.